Hello, Forgers, and welcome to Metasight, a podcast where we discuss SoulForge fusion mechanics, meta, and maneuvers. I'm your host, Onk, and today we have some more spoilers for Shadows Over Solis. I am excited to get into it. This week is Aloyan and Utera week, and I have two cards to preview for you guys. One is common, one is rare. Both are non-forged creatures, so let's take a look at our first one by the name of Vector Lure. So at level 1, this is a 3/4 Metamind Scientist that reads Mobility 1, and when an enemy creature enters this lane, it gets -3 attack. At level 2, it's a 6/7, still has the Mobility 1, it gives -4 attack. And at level 3, it is a 10/12 with Mobility 1 and the same effect, gives -5 attack. Now, in general, I am not always very high on these cards that require your opponent to sort of play into them for them to have an effect. In this case, your opponent has to play the creature into the lane, or in certain circumstances, mobility their creature into the lane to get that minus attack effect. But in terms of Vector Lore, I can see this card being super annoying to play against, especially if your opponent has limited removal options. And let me go over why I think this is going to be annoying. Okay, so first off, the -3 attack means that any creature that they play opposed to it is going to need to have a minimum of 7 attack at level 1 to take this guy out. And in general, creatures with high attack at level 1 tend to have low health to begin with. So like a 7/3 creature is required to take something out like the Vector Lore in one shot. If the creature they play opposed to it can't take out the Vector Lore in one shot, the lure has mobility to move itself out of the way again and also, create a little bit of havoc in the next lane over. So if we look at it from sort of just like an overall stats, it has 3/4, so that's a 7 stat points. Our target at level 1 is about 12, so you get another 3 if your opponent plays a creature opposite. So you're about, like 2 points shy of being on curve. You get the mobility, maybe you're like a 1 point shy of it on curve, assuming your opponent puts a creature in front of it. At level 2, you get about, 17 points to work with, so you're only about one point shy. At level 3, you've got, assuming they play into it, you just have like right on curve of that 27 points of affecting the board. At level 1 and 2, it's not a super big threat, but with the sort of emphasis on augments in this set, I can see this wearing augments really, really well, because it's going to be very hard to deal with in combat. I think this is going to be kind of a nuisance card. I don't think it's overpowered. I like that it has the Metamind creature type to go with it. We have seen in the Aloyan Utera preview that there's at least one card that cares about Metaminds. So hopefully there'll be a high saturation of Metamind creatures in this set. A lot of what Aloyan seems to be doing in Shadows Over Solis is debuffing creatures. You'll see that in this card and at my next preview card in just a moment. So I don't think this is going to be like a game-breaking card, but I do think in the right situation, it's going to take a lot of your opponent's resources to deal with this. And it's going to put in more work than you'd initially think. You can't really throw like a Wisp in front of it to even like say like put a 6-power creature in front of it and they can't quite take it out in one shot. If you move it the next turn, it's not like they can just throw a Wisp in front of it to take it out. They're going to have to put another creature with a high amount of attack on it, and that debuff is permanent. So you've done a lot of affecting the board in terms of taking out stats on their creatures, and it just sort of like, your opponent could probably ignore it if it's got a low attack, but they run the risk of you playing an augment onto it or another buffing effect and chipping through for a lot of damage if they don't have removal to directly deal with it. And by the time you get to the 3rd level of it, it's a reasonable threat. I mean, having a 17 attack creature that you have to throw in front of it just to block it means that oftentimes they're not going to be able to take this out in a single combat without either putting a very high priority creature in front of it or spending resources on buffing their creature or using like chip damage from other spells to try and take it out. And even if they do take it out and keep their creature alive, it's going to have that -5 penalty going forward. So I can see the Vector Lore putting in a lot of work that sort of isn't splashy, but can really swing things in an awkward position for your opponent and actually end up contributing to a game win in a way that's kind of sneaky. And I think a lot of what Aloyan's doing in Shadow Over Solis is going to be pretty sneaky, as one way to put it. So yeah, Vector Lore, it's a common card. It's interesting. It's not a very big threat at the first level, but once you stick it out there and you dedicate it to sort of your upgrade for, the card that you're playing and upgrading, I can see it being a really big nuisance for your opponent. So that said, let's take a look at our second preview card. And this card I'm really excited about, actually. It's called Cortex Vane. So at level 1, it's a 4/4 creature, Metamind Scientist, so we got that Metamind again. And it reads, deploy, one of your creatures gets +2 attack, an enemy creature gets -2 attack. At level 2, it's a 6/6. At deploy, gives up one of your creatures +3 attack, an enemy creature -3 attack. And at level 4, it's an 8/8 creature, but it has activate. One of your creatures gets +4 attack, and an enemy creature gets -4 attack. So, why am I excited about this creature? I think this creature is going to put in a lot of work that is going to lead to turns where you completely swing the tide of battle, especially in sealed. This thing's going to be a real pain in the butt to play against. So, if we talk just pure stats, at level 1, you get the requisite 12 points of stats to work with. You get the +2 attack, the -2 to an enemy, and the 8 with the Cortex Vane itself. At level 2, again, you're getting 18 total stats to work with, 6/6 at the 12 at the creature level, plus another 6 with the deploy ability. And at level 3, you're getting 24 points to work with, but where 27 is kind of your threshold, but it's an activated ability, so you can do it multiple times. When we're talking about the level 1, the worst case scenario, this is a 6/4 creature that gives one of your opponent's creature -2 attack. So we talk about in Soulforge Fusion, and especially in sealed play, a lot of the way that Soulforge Fusion works is a lot about combat manipulation and winning board position. Cortex Vane is going to do a fantastic job at this, because a lot of times what you're doing, your opponent's going to be lining up what we call catches. Essentially, you're putting a creature in front of your opponent's creature that will take out your opponent's creature but let your creature survive. Okay, so you've basically traded, you've basically negated your opponent's action and kept your creature on board in that situation. You may have a creature that's severely weakened, but your opponent still has to deal with that creature on subsequent turns, right? So if we talk about in terms of catching, what Cortex Vane can do is turn what would have been a catch for your opponent into a trade, and what would have been a trade for your opponent into a catch on your own side. So you've basically flipped combat from what's in favor for your opponent to what's in favor for yourself. So imagine like a pretty common situation that you'll run into on Soulforge, like just a very common board you might see. Maybe you have like a 7/6, your opponent throws a 6/6 in front of it to trade. In another lane, they've got a creature that's maybe down to a few points of health that from a previous turn, and you've got another creature where, you've got some creature like a wisp, and they put something in front of it with 4 toughness to just, deal with your wisp, right? You throw a Cortex Vane down, suddenly their 6/6 against your 7/6 is now a 4/6, so your 7/6 is now going to trade. The Cortex Vane is going to take out the creature with the low health, and now your Wisp is going to trade up with whatever 4 toughness creature they put out there, right? So you're going to change what was going to be a catch, 2 catches, into a trade and a catch and a removal of their creature. So instead of you being down 2 cards and them being down 1, suddenly they're down 3, right? And you're up like 1. So this card is going to do a lot to manipulate the board in ways that are very deceptive. And again, that just becomes more and more exacerbated as you go up in levels. And like the worst case scenario, like the fail case of this card, is that you have like a 9/6 creature or like a 12/8, right? Like it's not significantly understated if there's no other creatures on the board. And really at like level 3, if you can keep this on the board for more than one turn, it's going to be incredibly painful for your opponent if they don't have good out of combat ways of dealing with creatures. So I really like the space that Aloyan is playing with in this set, with this sort of buffing your creatures and debuffing their creatures, especially in attack. Like we've seen it before in previous sets, like here and there, but it seems like they're really putting a lot of emphasis with a lot of cards that deal with debuffing your opponent's creature's attack and sort of neutralizing threats. And these effects as one-ofs are not, are kind of like situational, but given how much redundancy we're starting to see with this effect, I can really see it being a strategy in and of itself. At the very least, like a very controlling strategy for Aloyan. So I'm excited to see how this pairs in Shadows Over Solis. I think these cards, the Cortex Vane and the Vector Lore, are going to put in a lot of legwork that may not be immediately obvious. I don't know how well they're going to perform in constructed play. It just depends on where the meta goes. But I think, again, like a lot of... they play in a very interesting space at sort of like the bare bones that Soulforge is all about, which is lane control. And these kinds of cards are going to be fantastic at controlling sort of your board position and really putting your opponent to the test of where they're going to put their resources if they don't have like a very specific plan that can go around it. So yeah, like to see the Metamines showing up. I'm a little... I'd be interested to see if any Metamines show up in other factions. It's unlikely, but we'll have to see what happens there. But yeah, Vector Lore, Cortex Vane, these are the previews for this week. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please feel free to give a like and subscribe so I know that this is the kind of content that you guys like to see. My plan is later in the season to do a full review of the set once it's fully spoiled. And we'll have a little bit more context to look at for how these cards actually shake out. So again, thank you for watching Metasight, and I'll catch you guys for the next video.